She had saved for years to finally buy her dream home, a quiet place by the lake where she could feel safe. But the day she moved in, the welcome she expected never came. Instead, a group from the neighborhood stormed up to her door, demanding what was hers, because they didn't think she belonged there. They didn't know she had more power over their lives than they could imagine. What happened next wasn't just about property. It was about something far uglier. And once it started, there was no going back. For months, Maya had been counting down the days until she could finally move into her new home. It wasn't just any house. It was a peaceful, sunlit cottage with a view of the lake, the kind of place she'd only dreamed about while working double shifts in the city. The water shimmered in the mornings, and at night, the sound of gentle waves lulled her to sleep. To Maya, this wasn't just property. It was proof that her hard work, persistence, and sacrifices had meant something. She imagined quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, friendly waves from neighbors, and a community where she could belong. But almost immediately, something felt off. Passing glances lingered a little too long. Conversations seemed to pause when she walked into the local store. She told herself it was just small-town curiosity, nothing more. Still, the unease grew with each day. She didn't know the exact moment it would happen, but somewhere deep inside, she could feel it coming. There was a storm on the horizon, and it had nothing to do with the weather. It started with a knock. Not a friendly tap or a casual hello, but a sharp, demanding thud that rattled the glass in the front door. Maya opened it to find 3 people standing on her porch, 2 men in polo shirts with HOA logos, and a woman with a clipboard who didn't bother to smile. Without introducing themselves, they launched straight in. The lake, they said, was a shared community resource, and she would need to sign it over to the homeowners association. Their tone was clipped, their eyes cold, and there was no hint of a welcome to the neighborhood. Maya's stomach tightened. She had the paperwork, every legal document stating the lakefront was part of her property. She tried to explain, but one of the men cut her off. "We don't care what you think you own," he said, his voice low but dripping with hostility. "This is how it's always been." The words carried an unspoken weight, the kind Maya had felt before. She'd heard them in different forms, at job interviews, in stores, in quiet moments when people decided she didn't belong. It wasn't just about the lake. It was about her. Over the next week, the pressure grew. Letters in her mailbox. Neighbors avoiding eye contact. A community meeting, where her name was the only one on the agenda. They said the lake was essential for the neighborhood's docks, that without her compliance, things could get difficult. Then came the phone calls late at night. No one on the other end, just breathing. Maya began double-checking her locks, drawing her blinds before sunset. Each time she stepped outside, she felt eyes on her. But what they didn't know was that those same docks they were desperate to protect legally depended on her property. She had the final say over access, and that power terrified them even more than they scared her. Still, the harassment didn't stop. One morning, she found a note on her porch. "You can't fight all of us." The handwriting was jagged, almost carved into the paper. That night, as she sat in her living room with the lights off, she saw the beam of a flashlight sweep across her backyard, toward the water. Someone was down by the shoreline, their shadow stretching across the lake. Her heart pounded. Was this intimidation? A threat? Or the beginning of something worse? She didn't know it yet, but the next encounter would force her to decide, stay quiet and give in, or fight back with everything she had. The first sign came just 3 days after Maya moved in. She was unpacking boxes when she noticed 3 SUVs parked along the street, engines idling. A group of people stood together, not talking to her, not even looking her in the eye, but making sure she saw them. The next morning, a letter slid under her door. No envelope, no greeting, just a demand. "The lake belongs to the community. Sign the release by Friday." There was no signature. At first, she thought it was a misunderstanding. She had every legal document proving the shoreline, the docks, and the water rights were hers. But when she called the HOA office, the woman on the phone didn't even let her finish. "That's not how it works here," she said flatly, and hung up. Over the following days, things escalated. She'd walk into the local grocery store, and conversations would stop. People stared, some with open hostility, others with a kind of smug amusement. On one visit, a man in line behind her muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Some people think they can just buy their way in." It wasn't just about the lake. It was about her being here at all. Then came the inspection. Two HOA members showed up unannounced, clipboards in hand, claiming they needed to check compliance. They didn't ask before stepping onto her porch, peering through her windows, scribbling notes. When she asked them to leave, one smirked. "Careful, you don't want to make this harder than it needs to be." That night, she noticed movement near the water. A figure, tall, broad-shouldered, stood at the edge of her property, shining a flashlight across the docks. When she stepped outside and called out, the light snapped off. Footsteps retreated into the dark. Maya's heart raced. This wasn't intimidation anymore. It was a warning. By the end of the week, she found a sign hammered into the ground near her driveway. Community property, access required. Someone had trespassed to put it there. But here's what they didn't understand. Those docks they were so desperate to protect from outsiders could only function if she granted access to the lake. Without her signature, they'd lose their permits, their gatherings, even the property value they guarded so fiercely. And that terrified them. The call started next, late at night, just silence on the other end. Sometimes she heard breathing. Other times, a faint chuckle before the click of a hang-up. Then, one evening, as the sun set in a blaze of red over the water, she heard a knock at the door. Slow, deliberate, the kind that said the person on the other side wasn't going away. When she opened it, 5 people stood there, HOA members, flanked by neighbors she barely recognized. One stepped forward. "You've got until tomorrow to decide," he said, voice low and steady. Maya tightened her grip on the doorframe. She didn't answer, because tomorrow she had her own plan. The next morning, Maya didn't wait for them to come to her. She went to the docks. The air was sharp with the smell of the lake, the boards creaking under her feet. One by one, the HOA members emerged from their houses, drawn to the scene like moths to a flame. They stood in a loose semicircle, their faces tight with hostility. The man who had given her the ultimatum stepped forward. "You've made this a lot harder than it needed to be," he said, his tone heavy with something unspoken. Maya's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "I know exactly what I own. And without my permission, these docks are illegal. You want to talk about making things harder? Try explaining to the county why your property values just dropped." A ripple of murmurs passed through the group. The man's jaw tightened. "You don't belong here," he said, each word slow, deliberate, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with property lines. She felt it, the heat in her chest, the years of being told in 1,000 subtle ways that she was out of place. This wasn't just a fight over water. It was about who they thought had the right to stand here. And then, one of them stepped closer, invading her space, his voice low. "You'll regret this." Maya didn't move. She didn't blink. She pulled a folded letter from her jacket, an official notice to revoke dock access, signed and sealed by the county. "This," she said, holding it up so they could all see, "goes into effect today." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind over the water. Then, slowly, she turned and walked back toward her house, the weight of every stair burning into her back. But as she closed her door, she knew this wasn't over. Because when power shifts, people rarely give it up quietly. In the weeks that followed, the HOA tried everything: petitions, complaints, even legal threats. But the county ruling stood. Without Maya's approval, the dock stayed closed. What had once been a place for neighborhood gatherings now sat silent, the boards weathering under the sun. Some neighbors avoided her completely. Others, quietly, began to stop by, not to offer apologies, but to admit they'd seen what was happening and hadn't spoken up. "It's just the way things are around here," one woman murmured, as if that made it better. For Maya, the victory was bittersweet. She had kept what was hers, but she couldn't ignore what it had taken to defend it. Not just the sleepless nights and constant fear, but the ugly truth that the fight had never been about a lake at all. It was about drawing a line, about telling someone like her that no matter how much she worked, how much she earned, she'd never truly belong. And that truth didn't disappear with one legal win. It lived on, in whispers, in stares, in the quiet calculation of who is welcomed and who is watched. Maya knew she had made her stand. But she also knew the next person might not have the same resources, the same proof, the same outcome. Because this wasn't just her story. It's a story replayed in neighborhoods across the country, in different forms, but with the same message. So the question isn't whether Maya won. The question is, how many more times will someone have to fight just to prove they have the right to be where they already belong.